It's 12:01, and I would like to ask our panelists now up to the panel to join me here. We have, not in the order they're walking necessarily, but we have Aksum Tefera, we have Anne Jensen, and we have Tüzin Baycan, and I hope you find your right, so you sit behind the right names there. And let me just go back to our PowerPoint real quick. Perfect. So Aksum, thank you for joining us here today. You're a clean energy planner at the Boston Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, and you work on climate change action and have a lot to tell us. I would like you to be as concise as possible. You do have a few slides in here, and I think you can actually, yeah, if we just go, this is your starting slide, and you can use them for referencing. And I wanted to go right ahead and ask you a question, though. So from what we heard before, yeah, we just had this election result come in. You're in a US city, you're in Boston, in Massachusetts. And how do you see that impacting your work and your projects in Boston? I know we talked about it a little bit before already, but if you can try to answer that, maybe tough question, but maybe you can try that real quick.
Thank you, Max. And to begin, I think it's very important that cities and states in the U.S. pressure the federal government to ensure we're still working towards meeting the Paris Agreement's commitments. So we'll continue to do that. But in spite of that, Massachusetts and Metro Boston itself has been very progressive on climate change for some time now. In 2008, our former Governor Deval Patrick signed the Global Warming Solutions Act, and it set goals to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. And so we were among the first states to do that, and that's below 1990 levels. And a big driver in that direction has been on energy efficiency, which we call the first fuel. And then there's been a lot of success there because of many state incentives that have come into place. And then many municipalities in the state have also are participating in the Compact of Mayors to really show their commitment at a global level. And here's a map actually of the region that I work in, 101 cities and towns. And then if you zoom into the innermost 14, we have this Metro Mayors Coalition of representatives from these 14 cities and towns. And it was after Hurricane Sandy that they realized, wow, we really are very close to New York City. This could have happened to us. It probably will with climate change. How do we prepare? It was a big wake-up call. And so they formed this platform and launched a climate preparedness task force in order to address mitigation and adaptation. Held a first summit in 2015 to focus on preparedness, and the risks for us are really sea level rise, increased precipitation, and increased heat. And so we're moving forward with 4 particular objectives in that preparedness umbrella. And then just yesterday, actually, the mayors convened for a second summit on mitigation. So we're developing an agenda for the local level to continue to advance mitigation goals. And that's primarily in transportation, building, energy efficiency sector, and renewables.
So getting back to that right away, what are good examples, or how do you combine mitigation and adaptation in Boston, and what would be some actually specific cases or examples that you would like to share here?
Sure. So through the Metro Mayors platform, that's been really ideal to force the mayors and their staff to meet regularly and find those synergies for mitigation and adaptation. And right now, I would say we're able to merge both and see co-benefits on the energy side and in smart growth land use planning. So on energy, we're trying to push distributed generation, clean microgrids, and renewable thermal, as increasing heat is a big problem for us. Well, I should begin with how Boston is one of the older cities in the US, and so a lot of buildings do not have central air conditioning, which is unlike a lot of other US cities. So we're beginning to see an increasing demand for cooling technologies. So we're trying to make sure that it's renewable thermal that goes into place there. And then on the land use planning side, our most successful example has been a partnership with Trust for Public Land. We are developing this climate smart region tool. It's a web-based GIS tool for planners. And it's going to help you decide what are the optimal locations for green infrastructure interventions. And there are 4 criteria we're looking at when we say green infrastructure solutions. It's cool, connect, absorb, and protect. Cool is how do you reduce urban heat island effect impact? And on the mitigation side, that's hopefully then reducing cooling demands. Connect is creating more appealing bike paths, walking paths, so that there's a mode shift that's more attractive. Absorb is green infrastructure for the purpose of stormwater management. With increased rain, we don't want to create more stress on our gray infrastructure. And then protect is looking at barrier buffer zones for green infrastructure.
Oh, that's very exciting. It's also great to have catchy names and slogan, because that really, it's important to make it attractive and something people want to talk about and be associated with. So that's definitely not as important, but also very, very important.
Yes.
Since we're here in a transatlantic session, what is the role, or how important is learning from European cities, or how do you exchange with European cities, bringing your experiences to them?
Yes, for me personally, I'm a member of the ELEEP network, which you heard Max introduce earlier. And that's been a vital learning experience. We actually ended a climate study tour a few weeks ago and got to see in person what is happening and what innovative things are happening across Europe. And the cohort that went was a mix of Americans and Europeans from different levels of government, different sectors, some actually private sector. So it created this really unique space to think creatively, innovatively in a collaborative way. And we're going to continue that kind of work in doing policy research together in a transatlantic way, and hopefully then applying that research in each of our cities. And professionally also, we, for example, have a partnership with the Dutch consulate in Boston and did a delegation exchange there. And that's been a huge learning experience. For us, the benefit is the Dutch know very well how to live with water. We're expecting a lot more water and sea level rise. And so what can we learn? What tools can we adopt and keep us protected?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. In the interest of allowing everybody here on the panel to speak first, we're going to have the open Q&A at the end with what's left then at the end. That's not saying we don't have a Q&A, it's just a realistic approach. So thank you very much, and you'll be back online when we go into the Q&A. Now to our second panelist. Tüzin, thank you for joining us here today. You're a professor at the Istanbul Technical University, and you work there on post-carbon cities or sustainable cities, and work also in European research contexts with other colleagues from Europe and beyond. And you just came back actually from a conference in the United States, in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So you are also a very transatlantic researcher. Thank you for joining us here today. And I was hoping you would tell us a little bit about the work that you do in Istanbul with cities, or how you work or learn from other experiences in Europe and in the United States, and how this helps you integrating climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I think we have a few slides here as well. So this is the trick.
Okay, thank you very much. I am from Istanbul, and I guess everybody knows about Istanbul. Istanbul is a mega city, and Istanbul is more than a city. Istanbul means Turkey most of the cases. So what I'm telling to you today, there are some global challenges and international challenges, and Istanbul has been affected also very strongly from all these developments and challenges. So today I would like to tell you about energy issues, and I would like to link the climate change adaptation and mitigation with the energy issues, because Turkey is on the different energy corridors. So geographically the country is in a very hot spot, and Istanbul is also affected very much from these developments in the region. So just recently, just 1 month ago, the 23rd World Energy Congress was held in Istanbul, and the main theme of the Congress was embracing new frontiers. The event brought together more than 10,000 world leaders in the field of energy, and the future visions for the global energy industry as well as opportunities were discussed at the Congress. So what is the situation and position of Turkey and also Istanbul within this context? The main priority for Turkey is the promotion of East-West and North-South energy corridors through delivery of Caspian, Middle Eastern, and Central Asian energy resources to European and world markets via Turkey. So this is a very critical thing. And the other aspect and the main challenge for Turkey, Turkey is an emerging country. The country has become one of the fastest growing energy markets in the world. And Turkey is ranked as second after China in terms of natural gas and electricity demand growth. So this is the main challenge. And Turkey's demand for energy is nearly 3 times higher than the world's average. So what does it mean for Istanbul? Istanbul's economy is more than 130 countries. So this demand is also very high for the city. And then nowadays 25% of the total energy demand is being met by domestic resources, and the main challenge for Turkey is to realize its own energy security. So to diversify its energy supply routes and source countries, increase the share of renewables and include also the nuclear in its energy mix, and take significant steps to increase energy efficiency and contribute to Europe's energy security is the main aim of the country. And then Istanbul Energy Exchange Istanbul exists. Was established in order to lead the development of energy market through managing it in an effective, transparent, and reliable manner last year. So this is the ambition for 2023. So this is the centennial foundation of the Republic. I won't go to the numbers, of course, but this is the main challenge now in the country and for the city. And between this COP22 and then the next COP, 23, the country will, and also Istanbul, will focus on this global and international aspects of development, and this energy dependency is the main issue. And with this, let's say, vision for the future, will shape also all the policies at the city level. Thank you.
So thank you, Tüzin. Just to get back to you right away, so you talk about climate and energy goals in Istanbul and Turkey, and you said it's a lot, it's synonymous in a way. However, you are also, it's a country on the Mediterranean, it's a country in a semi-arid climate in some ways. How is your outlook from the city level looking at adaptation needs, speaking of heat waves or water scarcity or even rising sea levels? And what do you do to combine both and to get these co-benefits? Do you have an approach there?
So Istanbul cannot compete with Copenhagen. So we are in the beginning of this process, of course. So we don't have a local climate plan yet. We have so many big infrastructure projects, and they are very helpful for adaptation and mitigation. But we are in the beginning of this local climate planning. So we have learned a lot during the POCACITO project, of course, from other cities in our project team, project consortium. But I would like to mention also managing a megacity is more challenging than managing any other city. So we have more problems maybe, but it's also more difficult and more challenging to manage a city with 15 million population, and 20% of the total population of the country is living in this city. So there are many international corporations also. So we learn a lot from Europe, and I think we can offer also different experiences from our city. But we have lots of international agreements with Russia about Turkish stream, Blue Stream, this kind of streams for natural gas. We have some international cooperation with Israel and Azerbaijan and Cyprus. The Mediterranean energy corridor is another important issue. Regarding, for example, the heat island effect, so it will take time, of course, because the city is huge and then urban sprawl is very demanding, and we are losing our green spaces. So there are many challenges also there.
Thank you, Tüzin. Thank you. It was very interesting when you said you don't have a local climate plan, either for mitigation or adaptation or for both. So that's very interesting. And so I really hope, I truly hope that, you know, even though you have a lot of other challenges, you mentioned that, that this will be a topic on the agenda, and that maybe there can be learning processes, including across the Atlantic. So thank you for that input. And now I want to turn to our third panelist here today. Dr. Anne Jensen is a senior researcher in environmental policy analysis at the Aarhus University in Denmark. She has a PhD in European policy making and mobility, and has worked extensively, including with us on the Post-Carbon Cities project, on urban mobility and the role of local governments. And I want to thank you for being here today with us, or you already have the pointer, perfect. And I want to ask you to give us a little bit of a perspective. Of course, I said Aarhus University, but the focus is on Copenhagen, not very far in Denmark. and you work a lot with the municipality in Copenhagen. And I wanted to ask you, since you now represent here a generally accepted global climate leader, Copenhagen, what challenges do you still see in that global climate leader? So we see very different cities here at the on the panel. And so where are your challenges? What is difficult from your perspective, especially when we look to the topic, integrating mitigation and adaptation? So
yes, thank you very much, Max. It's a pleasure being here. And I think we should start by, Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark. It's a small, big city, not like Istanbul. There's about 1.7 million people in the greater Copenhagen area. It's about 30% of Denmark's population, but still it's a small city. And about 10 years ago, they crafted their first vision in the city for becoming, in post-carbon vision. It's called the Eco-Metropolis. And it had a goal of reducing CO2 emissions by 20% by 2015. In 2013, they were at, I think it was 21% reductions. And they made a new, an updated vision for 2025, which is Copenhagen becoming carbon neutral by 2025, which is the one I have on the slide here. At the same time and in parallel with this, since the vision from 2007, climate adaptation has been targeted, and this is primarily due to some very active people in the municipality, but also because Copenhagen experienced some really severe climate events in 2010 and 2011, where big parts of the city, including national archives and national hospital and the parliament, they were flooded. So they crafted a climate adaptation plan. I couldn't find one with an English translation, but it's the one that says Copenhagen Klimatilpasningsplan, which is climate adaptation plan. And even though they have moved forward in both mitigation and in adaptation, lots of challenges still exist here. And one of the things that connected the climate mitigation and the climate adaptation was that parallel to the visions, the key executives in the municipality, the key the directors of the different departments of the city council, they crafted a narrative for the city, which is called the Copenhagen Story, where they integrated the climate mitigation activities, becoming climate neutral, with the climate adaptation and some and other areas that were very close to the citizen, like the city becoming more livable, focusing on people in the city, a city for people they called it, and on mobility, which is, as in all cities, is a big issue. But while they were still focusing on these things, some parts have been difficult to manage and are still challenges, and this concerns the rising car traffic, because as you could see on Barbara Hün's slides, in Germany transport was the same. It's the same in Denmark, and including in Copenhagen, where you have cars emitting more CO2, not even though they're more energy efficient. And in Copenhagen, you have 50% now people using the bike. They cycle to work or study-related travels, but still you have problems with congestion and air pollution. Also, you have still have challenges in managing the 100 years flooding events that are, or even the 50 years flooding events. And you have a rising concern for the social inequality that comes with a city becoming more prosperous, or it has come in Copenhagen. Copenhagen has focused very much on using nature-based solutions on green and blue areas as a way of mitigating urban heat islands, as a way of mitigating climate adaptation, flooding. So they are developing the city in a way that makes it much more inhabitable and much more nice to live in. So people with families and high education, etc., they stay in the city, pushing the less affluent people further out. And this is one of the big challenges, the social inequality and the access to amenities coming with the greening of the city and the better, the more amiable urban spaces. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think it's amazing to see how much has happened already, and also how citizen-oriented you are in a lot of ways, but there's still new challenges coming up. Because the more beautiful you make Copenhagen, the more people want to move there. It's kind of the curse also of very beautiful spots in nature or cities that attract too many tourists. You don't not only attract tourists, but people want to live there, and that drives up the pricing for everybody. Very interesting question, and definitely not limited to Copenhagen. I mean, we see that, of course, in the US, in cities, maybe even in Boston, and definitely in other large cities there. We see it in London, we see it in Paris, where people on a median income cannot afford to live even in the outskirts of the city. Very good point. I think we have quite a good moment now left for Q&A. I would like, we still have the microphone, the mobile microphone over there. So you can ask questions now to either individuals on the panel or open to the panel. And please go ahead. We have a hand up here, the gentleman in the gray shirt. And please, again, say your name and stick to the part. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. Franco Montalto, Drexel University in Philadelphia. And the question I wanted to ask to the keynote speaker is the same. It was the same spirit of what we just heard in Copenhagen, that we know that cities, as they're confronting the challenges of climate, are facing other challenges. For example, inequality. For example, the arrival, changes in population dynamics. In Europe, you have refugees. And I've been gathering examples of unique pilot projects where, in a small way, there have been sort of cross-pollination of solutions that aren't just connecting mitigation to adaptation, but going one step further and connecting mitigation to adaptation to, for example, jobs creation, or, for example, other social resilience measures, creating opportunities for engagement or participation. So I was curious in the cities represented here it was highlighted in Copenhagen, but I want to know specifics. So specifically, and in the political context, what have you found as the most, are there win-win solutions that have been embraced by both those whose primary mission is thinking about climate, but also those whose primary mission is thinking about social issues that are faced by cities? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We give each panelist 1 minute to respond. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think it's a very relevant question. And one of the things that has actually made Copenhagen move forward in many of these areas is that they have always, all their initiatives have been based on that it should have co-benefits, never ever just having one, just climate adaptation or climate mitigation, but also showing something for the citizens and having it people-centered. And then it has been based also on, they have one neighborhood, and they're making a second neighborhood now, which is experimental, where they have used people initiatives and they've given people space, local citizens space to develop their own solutions in a way that made sense for them. So even though they wanted climate adaptation in this one area, people were more concerned about mobility and creating green spaces, so they used that as a stepping stone for developing adaptation solutions.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, and I think we're still in Boston trying to figure out how to move forward on that. This city has a big housing crunch right now, so there's a lot of demand for new construction, new building, And so developers tend to eye properties or spaces where they can buy land cheaply, and that tends to be environmentally not the best places. So we're looking at policy levers and zoning to see what we can reform there, but it's still in the works. And we're in the middle of the problem right now with housing issues and housing not being affordable for many people. But one small example of how we're marrying the three: equity, adaptation, mitigation. A very small one is there's been a boom in urban agriculture in a lot of communities where there isn't good food access to healthy, naturally grown foods. And so it's helping with stormwater management and also a service to those who live in those communities. And it's just incredible how much that's picked up throughout the city. But again, a very small step, and we're trying to figure out the larger issues.
Thank you. I think we had a question on that side. You have the microphone already. Perfect. Please go ahead. Keep it short.
All right, I will. Thank you. My name is Lisa Junghans, and I'm working for German Watch. And thank you for the very interesting presentations. And I very much agree with what also Bärbel Höhn said in the beginning. Cities do have a lot of potential in reducing emissions. However, one of the critique points that comes up every now and then in discussions is that there is no local MRV system for cities to really track if they are on track with their goals that they're committed to. So a lot of cities have joined the Compact of Mayors, the Global Compact of Mayors, and submitted those highly ambitious commitments. But if they're really reaching them, that's often under question, and there's the potential for greenwashing. And I'd be interested in your assessment if cities are actually on track, or if they have high targets, but it's not really feasible in actually reaching them. Thanks.
So thank you for the question. So let's keep the answers short, but I think every panelist should answer that question. It's a you should know.
My agency is trying to help municipalities refine their data collection. Even simple things like energy use, getting a proper inventory is very challenging. So we're trying to create some kind of uniformity of how cities and towns in our region are reporting. But it's still in the works, and then we're trying to help alleviate that mismatch and whether some municipalities are using incorrect numbers or not. Yeah.
Thank you, Axel. Tüzin, do you want to say something about, because I remember in the project, getting data was also a challenge specifically in Istanbul.
Yeah. So I would like to tell you that for some specific cities, the system works in a different way. So Istanbul is a primate city, and it's very important. But most of the cases, the decision about the city is not taken by city stakeholders, by Istanbul, but from the government agencies, from governmental institutes in Ankara. So this is the case for Istanbul. So there are some local, of course, some local initiatives, as Istanbul is a very big city. Istanbul is in C40 cities group. Istanbul is involved also in many, at the municipality level, in many international associations. The city is doing many things, but most of the cases, the city cannot develop some local things independently, as the city represents the country.
Thank you. Thank you, Tüzin. And yes, we noticed that challenge already dealing with EU-based cities and non-EU-based cities, different data availability and reliability, and then, of course, different governance structures, what you mentioned, Tüzin. Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, I think it's, sometimes it's a challenge for cities to actually collect this kind of data, where you should maybe develop more approaches to citizen science so you could get sort of reliable data from citizens. At the same time, I think in Copenhagen, for example, there's this green accounting, where they annually publish their performance within energy, waste, transport, etc., etc. And in order to do that in a way that's reliable, it should also be way where it's okay to make a mistake, or it's not, you know, it should be okay to say we're not performing well here. Like Copenhagen, they have bad air quality within some of the really bad air quality in some areas. They're not doing well on waste, for example. And creating this kind of culture might also stimulate that you can get more cities to actually say, okay, we want to be public about this kind of data and reliable about it.
That's a very good point, thank you. To make it actually possible to not just always succeed and excel every year, bigger, better, more. We have time for one final question in the Q&A. The gentleman at the back.
John Englert from Melbourne, Australia. Heat waves are a big issue in our cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth. So that extreme heat waves have a big health impact. In fact, they kill more people than bushfires in Australia. So we're looking at trying to ameliorate the urban heat island effect in our cities, because temperature differences can be, yes, up to 10 degrees more in the cities than the surrounding countryside. So we need to grow our urban tree canopy is one way we can start looking at ameliorating the urban heat island effect.
We need to get the question part. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm looking at what other ways can we use to try and get the heat of cities cooler.
Okay.
Adaptation.
Good. Now, some very quick thoughts. Anne, is that an issue in Copenhagen?
A little bit, but not too much, so I don't think I would be the expert.
Okay, maybe Boston, you mentioned little air conditioning prevalent, so maybe that's more of an issue.
Green infrastructures are a big approach too, I would say. We feel there's a lot of bang for your buck there. If there is cooling that's needed for new construction, we are talking about better design, passive design, and so that's very much working with the developer community to move that along. And then if cooling must be added, renewable heating and cooling, renewable cooling in this case, technologies, geothermal, air source heat pumps. But yeah, we're experiencing a similar thing, and it's newer for Boston, the heat wave thing, so we're exploring.
Perfect, thank you. Now, Istanbul is certainly exposed to heat waves, right?
Yeah, but we have also some good examples. So these examples can be seen in many other cities as well. But vertical gardens or roof vegetation help. I think that they help a lot to decrease a little bit the heat, especially in the high density urban centers. And this is a trend now. There are so many buildings with vertical vegetation and roof vegetation also in Istanbul.
Thank you very much. So it's 12:40. We go into the closing round now. I want to ask each of the panelists, because today is the closing day of COP22. So we are now ending of this COP, and then in about a year is the next one. What do you personally want to do to foster city-level mitigation and adaptation in the integration of the two in the coming year? Do you have any ideas already? It can be very simple, very applied, or high-level transatlantic dimension. Who wants to go first? I see Axum.
Okay. At a high level, we have this Metro Mayors Coalition platform of 14 communities. They've largely focused on preparedness issues because they have shared infrastructure. And just yesterday, they decided, we should also address mitigation as a region. So for me, moving forward in the next few months, it's identifying where are those synergies with mitigation adaptation, and how can we use this collective of 14 cities, which is very unique in Massachusetts, to drive that forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anna, do you want to go next?
Sure. And I think one of the challenges for working with a city like Copenhagen is for one thing, to upscale the experience of Copenhagen, because it's a wealthy city, it's a welfare country, etc., etc. And at the moment, Copenhagen has a very global outreach, but to help them even more upscale this, especially with the experimental neighborhoods and in integrating the adaptation solutions with the mitigation solutions. The other one is to refine the knowledge bases. I'm a researcher, so this is also one of the things where I think we can play a big role, and that's increasing the evidence for what works and what doesn't work, and what is the impact of doing this rather than this at a global scale. And I work also at very much at a European scale, where I think this is very important.
Thank you, Anne. And now, Tüzin, what do you plan for the coming year?
I think the challenges are both at the local, national, but also international level. The POCACITO project was a starting point for the municipality, Istanbul municipality, and then they requested to take our findings within the project and to put on their agenda and in their strategic plans. So this is a good result at the end. Of course, we will continue to cooperate at the European level for different projects, and there are many things to learn from each other, because Istanbul is a real laboratory that we can do many research and many implementation. But also it depends on the context, and we need to cooperate also not only with Europe but other cities, and transatlantic perspectives we should accept. Just one sentence. I was in Karachi a few months ago, and then when I gave a speech about Istanbul there, then all Karachi people and the audience, the conference audience, asked me how we have succeeded in Istanbul to do many things. So when we compare Istanbul with Copenhagen, maybe the city has many challenges, but when we compare Istanbul with Karachi, another mega city, so Istanbul has made a good progress, and we need some mega cities also to compare Istanbul, because in Europe there is no comparable city in terms of the size and the huge challenges and problems.
Right, and in Asia, of course, there's many large cities, also in Latin America and in Africa. So we definitely need to open our eyes. I want to say, let's close this session. I want to thank the three panelists, and of course our keynote speaker who had to leave earlier, but let's thank our three panelists for their contributions here today. I also want to thank you for your great questions and patience, and keeping it tight. It's 12:45, round of applause, then going out for the photo.